All right, getting ready for our next session. A fireside chat, a duo presentation from Eastside Games about mastering IP partnerships. So please welcome to the stage Elin and Wally.
Sorry, it was like, do we sit or do we stand?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Elin Jonsson, and I have with me Wally today, and we are here talking about mastering IP partnership, a guide to IP and brand management. And there we go.
Yeah, between the two of us, we have about 30 years of experience in games, and we partner up to get great IP and good brands into games, because these days, UA is really hard. So getting brands helps with that, but more importantly, extending brands into a larger audience, global scale, more entertaining. It adds a lot of elements to make gaming even better and more fun for everyone. So who are we? I'm Wally Nguyen. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Eastside Games. If I had two claims to fame, one, if you've ever seen a playable ad, I'm sorry, or you're welcome. I'm the guy who helped create the playable ad when I was the CEO of Nectar. And then after that, I was the first head of sales and content at Skills with a Z, where we took revenues to 1.5 billion and took it public onto the New York Stock Exchange.
And I'm Elin, and I am the Chief Business Officer at Eastside Games. I have been in mobile games for the last 13 years, and I started as an artist and then a production person, so producer in live ops, and became the Director of IP Partnerships at Eastside Games. And what I'm doing now at Eastside Games is very much about taking care of management for all our 13 IP partners that we have at Eastside Games. So Eastside Games, we are based in Vancouver, and we are very much specializing in IP and brands for mobile games. We have idle games and match 3 games, and we are both a publisher and also a developer. So we have 4 internal games and working with amazing developers around the world. We have IPs such as you see The Office, Power Rangers, Doctor Who, RuPaul's Drag Race, Star Trek Lower Decks. And what makes us special is that we have such big variance of IPs, so toys, sci-fi, comedy, like such big range of IP partners.
And to be honest, it's a lot of fun, right? My current favorite one is Squishmallows. I have 80 of them at home, mostly because I have 2 kids. But we're very proud of the partners that we work with. And to be clear, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation, and it's through the hard work of more than a decade at Eastside of just building our reputation as a publisher, as a developer, as a studio, to be able to work with these partners. So as Elin mentioned, RuPaul, Office. I mean, who doesn't love The Office? That's a global phenomenon at this point. So these are just some examples of the partners that we've been able to work with over the years. Yeah, so what's important to a brand? What's important to an IP? And so some people think it's money. And it is important, but it's actually not the first thing to think about. It's really about audience, right? So The Office is a good example. It's over. As much as you love The Office, it's done. It's coming back, by the way, but it's done. You can rewatch those episodes over and over and over, but for a long time, that was the only place you could see Dwight. That was the only place you could see the shenanigans, right, of Dunder Mifflin. But through gaming, we were able to re-engage that audience. We were able to give them another place to enjoy The Office. So engaging their current audience is usually the brand's, one of the first things they think about, and then audience extension, right? So some people first learn about The Office through the show, but sometimes they'll learn about it for the first time through a game. Another great property that we have is Trailer Park Boys. It's a Canadian flavor. It's a great show, but if you're not in Canada, maybe you haven't heard of it. But feedback was when people played the game, we heard, you guys should make a show of it. It's like, it was a show. It has a lot of seasons, and that's where they discover it. So think audience, think fan base. That's what's important to the IP. And then, of course, money, because we're in the business of businesses, and businesses need money and revenue to survive and thrive, and so revenues do matter. And then lastly, part of audience is marketing. How do we engage with an audience? Well, like The Office or like other shows or movies, that's kind of like a one-way channel. You entertain an audience, but you can't really talk to them. We all know games is different, right? You can engage with them differently. You can communicate with them, all the above. And so marketing is another factor there.
This is probably one of my favorite slides. So, how to express the brand faithfully, and this is super, super important, both for ESA Games, but also for me personally. One of the things that you will start with, of course, is the brand guidelines, and you might work with partners, they don't have guidelines. You might need to create them with your partner, with your IP partner while you start a project. And that's great to know before you sign the contract, so you know what you have to work with. Some partners will have great guidelines, and it's your job to understand them and ensure that your team are following the guidelines. But the guidelines can also just take you so far. Even if we work with partners, they have big, long documents, it's still up to you to fully understand the essence of the IP. So what is it? Like what is the feeling? What it makes this special? And my recommendation is that you have someone on the team that is a brand expert, that really, truly loves it. And as I said, we have 13 IP partners, and I've learned to, like certain IPs will come more naturally for me because I have grown up with it. But you mentioned Trailer Park Boys. I didn't watch Trailer Park Boys when I grew up in Sweden. It didn't come there when I grew up. And, but that was a brand that when I got the job at ESA Games, I watched every single episode. I felt what it meant, like I understood the humor, but not just understand it logically, you need to feel it. So if you don't personally have that connection to the brand, but you're still working on this game that has a very specific brand or IP, find someone on your team. And I can give one example. So we are working with AEW, so professional wrestling. I didn't grow up with wrestling. I didn't really understand it from the beginning, but we have this amazing writer on our team, and she's a professional wrestler. So she has been wrestling, and she guided us. She took us to the events and educated us. So even if you don't have one, if you're not the person, find the person, hire the person, and yeah, you don't want to do any brand slapping. It's just your fans. It's not going to work long term. You're going to hurt the relationships with the IP partner. You're going to hurt the relationship with your or with your players. So very, very important that you or someone in your team fully understand the essence. And that means that you need to also have a tailored approach. Just because you have worked with one IP partner doesn't mean that now you know how to work with all the other ones. They're very, very unique. And sometimes it's hard to remember that every single partner you work with, if it's Hasbro, NBC, World of Wonder, whoever it is, all of them are unique, and you need to find a way to understand truly what is important to them, what they really care about. And just because one partner will allow you to soft launch with a version 1 logo doesn't mean that all of them will be okay with that. And also understand the IP partner's game knowledge. It might be a toy company that have never made a mobile game before, and you will need to spend way more energy to educate them. How do we launch a game? And in our world, it's mobile games. So what is a technical launch? What is a soft launch? How does this work? Which KPIs are important? And you will need to educate them. And sometimes the point of contact that the IP partner will give you might be a producer that have been in games and everything will be easy, or your point of contact will be someone that has never played a mobile game before. So you never know. You just need to, as early as possible in your process, figure that out. And what else do I want to say here? I think that's more or less it. And of course, set up follow-up calls, and remember live ops. So your journey is not done when you launch the game. If you're in live ops, your relationship with IP partners will go on and on for years. Trailer Park Boys is such a good example because I've managed that relationship for over 7 years now. I'm still talking to them at least once a month. NBC, I talk to them every 2 weeks. And we have talked to each other for 4 years. So it's a lot of working with the IP partner for a long time. So whoever you want to assign the point of contact from your side, try to find someone that will stay with you for a long time, because you want to have those relationships over years. You don't want to change that. And you will notice when you work with IP partners, they have the same attitude on their end. I work with the same people, all my 13 partners. It's more or less the same people that I've worked with now for many years.
Yeah, so how to sign one, right? That's a big question. But the key thing is understand what you need for the game, right? Likeness is the thing. So if you're talking about The Office, which characters can you use, the artwork that's going to reflect them, or in Squishmallow's case, you have to collect them, not like Pokemon, but kind of like Pokemon. You go on your Squish hunts. So what rights? What do you have access to? What can you recreate in the game? Storylines, narrative, all of the above. It's really critical. And Elin said this earlier. You need to understand that property. I've watched The Office, the entire series, maybe 15 times now. So I know every single episode. I know every line. Squishmallows, again, I own a lot of them. So that innate knowledge helps me, by the time I meet with someone, to say, this is what we really need. I have that passion. I have some vision, of course, with my team. It's really good. You need to establish this clearly early on what they will allow and what they won't allow. Understanding the organizational structure, this is basic BD stuff, but who's the decision maker, who's supporting, who's your champion, who might say no, who are the concerns with. Sometimes you work with the show creator. Those are big egos, right? That this is their baby, this is their creation. They're going to come at it from a different angle than you are as a game producer, right? Projections. Keep it real. Just keep it real, right? Explain how games are hard. We know hit rates are abysmal. You launch a lot of games, most of them fail, unfortunately. It's good to explain realistic scenarios. So when I provide forecasts, low, medium, high, and that high isn't that high, right? Because we know if you have a blockbuster, these numbers kind of don't matter. But it's really good to establish a baseline set of expectations there. Yep.
And then the approvals. I know that a lot of people I've talked to, this is a tricky part, and this causes some headaches. You need to take in consideration that the IP partner wants to, in most cases, approve every single thing you do. So just plan for that in the beginning. And if they are a little bit, allow you to have a little bit more freedom, great. But working with big players, they want to approve everything. Try to have really clear organization on your assets. You will work with your team so everything is clear, what is approved and not. We work with Trello just because it's so simple, and most partners understand how to work in Trello. But they might have, your IP partner that you work with, they might have something very specific that they want you to work in. We still use Trello for the initial phase, and if the IP partner has something that needs to be in a very specific software after, we will have that as the final. But Trello, highly recommend that. And you get a timestamp, so that will be important. When we do these approvals, it's also important to remember that when I say everything more or less needs to be approved by the IP partner, I also talk about all the social assets, all the store listings, your game title. And it's going to be always a balance between what does the brand want and what do you know is the most important thing for the game. And it's always a trade-off. So you might know that it's very important for App Store optimization to have certain words in your title, and you will need to explain that for your IP partner. But in the end of the day, they might just want to have their brand more visible in the title with any other ASO, and then that's kind of what you need to go with. So you can do your part and educate, but in the end of the day, the IP partner will have the last say. And dates and deadlines. And one thing that I've learned is also that as soon as possible doesn't exist in this world. So don't ask your IP partner that you need the asset as soon as possible. I have had my best success when I clearly communicate the date and when it starts to have actually a consequence to the game. So for example, if you have an event that needs to go out and you need something approved, most times in a contract, the partner wants 10 days approval time, but it doesn't say anything with revisions. So most times they will not commit to that. So you will have 10 days, and then they will get feedback, and they might want to have a revision, and then they want another 10 days. So how are you going to plan for that? And we normally add 3 to 6 months to take this in consideration. And of course, the longer you work with IP partner, the easier it gets. You will start to understand what is really, really important. You will start to make less mistakes, because in the beginning you don't really know what's super important, and then after a while you start to learn. But yeah, as soon as possible, doesn't exist. Just clearly communicate that if we don't get this approved by this date, we can push out this event. And they don't want to cost, most of the time, they're like, okay, got it, we'll work on it. Or if you get an Apple feature, and they're like, okay, we need these assets on Thursday. It's like normally the IP partner understand that things can happen, but most times just try to plan for at least one revision, so you have 20 days approval process time.
All right, so wrapping it up, and then we'll move to Q&A. But key takeaways, right? Understand what your partner's goals are. Kind of mentioned, audience engagement, audience expansion. Understand what the brand guidelines are. Also help them establish the brand guidelines if they've never made a game before. In most cases, they're coming to you or they're coming to us as the game experts. And that's something critical to remember. We are the experts in gaming. They're the experts on their brand. How do we create a really good partnership there? Tailor your approach. You know your genres. You know what you're good at. Use your strengths, right? I've seen studios where they try and stretch a little bit and do a +1 or a +5 on top of what they know, and it comes off either unauthentic at best. That's the best they get out of it. And your deal guidelines. Understand what you need, understand what they need. It's all about win-win scenarios, right? These are not transactional type conversations. Elin mentioned these are sometimes years long, and if you're doing really well, decades long, and that's a good thing. So establish those expectations early on. Approvals. Elin mentioned at least 3 to 6 months for approvals. There's some stories are out there. You don't want to make green lightsabers and then find out 12 months later you need red ones now. And you're like, but I made them all one color already. That's kind of a true story too, by the way. Dates and timelines. So by the way, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but most of the time you'll get about a 3-year term. That's usually common. I don't know if everyone knows that. That's after game launch. So understand leading up to that, how long is it going to take? For Eastside, we typically say 9 to 12 months for core development, add 6 months for approvals, and that's being conservative, right? So just explaining how things are going to work, and then over the long haul, what are we doing for live ops? What are we going to be doing for special events? Talking about that early on not only sets expectations, but usually gets your partner excited. This is playing a long-term future. We're thinking about a forever brand, and we're thinking about a forever game, right?
And we have 46 seconds for Q&A.
Go fast.
Hi, quick question about the process of marrying up an IP with the gameplay or game loop concept? Which comes first? Do you have the game loop first and then look for an IP, or is it the other way around?
So for us, it's fairly simple because we have two models. So we have our narrative idle games. So we only look for IPs that fits that model. So it has certain criteria that it needs to hit. And now with MASH, it opens up to other IPs, but for us, it's the model, game model comes first, and then we find IPs that fits those two.
Yeah, that's a good question, and she's exactly right, because by the time you've approached a partner, they're looking for a track record, right? They're looking at what you're great at over the number of years, KPIs, success stories, based on what you know and your strengths. And so start with what you know, your loops, your design, and find IPs that are a natural, organic fit there. The no brand slapping is really key there.
All right, last question now.
Thank you both. You talked about the concept of sort of having a brand expert that you turn to, someone who knows and loves the IP, but obviously the same IP can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Just curious how you work through kind of defining what a single core vision of an IP looks like. Do you look to aggregate it? Do you target a certain type of person who engages with that content? Sorry, I didn't understand the question. So as in, if there's multiple visions as to what fans or those who engage with the IP kind of view as why it's important to them, or what they would want, you know, a Doctor Who game to look like, how do you go about kind of crafting that vision when there's multiple interpretations? Oh, gotcha. So very early on when we pitch the IP partner, we often from the studio, we have our own vision for what we want to do. So Doctor Who is a great example. So we really wanted to expand the universe for our players. We didn't want to just tell one-to-one stories. So our concept was to be able to write and come up with original stories. So that's what we are pitching at the IP partner. So so they know our vision already from the beginning, what kind of game we want to do, and they have seen our other portfolio of games. And then if the IP partner have a very specific vision that are very different from ours, maybe it's not a good fit. So we kind of figure out that before the contract is signed. Yeah. Yeah.
So start with your vision. Right? That's why it's important for you to understand that brand really well and have a strong vision there. You're going to be on or off, right? But again, if you get that deal, you're going to have to make that game, and so you have to have conviction. Don't go the other way, which is usually, hey, brand, what do you want? And they've never made games before, and it's also a weak stance of we'll do what you want, right? That you likely get a no pretty quickly. But come in with a strong vision, get feedback, iterate, and stem from there, and ultimately say yes if that's a game you want to make, you can do successfully. Say no if in 3 years it's not going to work out, because you're going to waste a lot of time, waste a lot of money if you go that route. I've seen the art style change quite a lot. So I remember when we did The Office, we had a very different art style that we presented, and we were aligned with everything else except that. So there was like some revisions after the contract was signed, just to be aligned what we both could do together.
All right. Elin, Wally, thank you so much for sharing your insights.